Primoz Roglic is sitting on the tarmac. His right side is opened up from shoulder to hip. His shorts are torn through. There is blood drying on his forearm. He had just had a good day. He had attacked in the last 3 kilometers of his sprint stage, taken 8 seconds out of the race leader, and cut the gap in the general classification of the Vuelta to 1 minute and 26 seconds with 5 stages left. And he would not start the next morning. And within 72 hours, the crash that ended his race would become more than just a crash. It would become a public accusation aimed by one of the biggest teams in the sport at a 23-year-old from South London who had never won a professional bike race. This is what happened in the last 75 meters of stage 16 at the 2022 Vuelta, and what happened afterwards, which was considerably worse. Roglic had won the Vuelta in 2019, 2020, and 2021. 3 in a row. A 4th consecutive win would have made him the first rider to win 4 Vueltas back-to-back. That was the prize sitting at the end of the 2022 race, and Roglic arrived in Spain in August, needing it more than he might have admitted. His summer had already collapsed once. He went to the Tour de France as a co-leader at Jumbo-Visma, hit the deck on the cobbles in the first week, and dislocated his shoulder badly enough that he was popping it back into place at the side of the road. He rode on for another week as a domestique and then went home. So the Vuelta was a salvage operation, and for 4 days, it looked like it would work. He won stage 4 and pulled on the red jersey, which was by then practically a mandatory uniform for him. Then, a 22-year-old Belgian rode away from him. Remco Evenepoel took more than a minute out of Roglic. Stage 16 ran 189 kilometers north. Between the start and finish, there is almost nothing, at least in the topographical sense, which is exactly why the stage was built. Only 1,100 meters of total elevation gain across an entire afternoon. The sprinters' last chance before Madrid. The peloton that rolled out was 142 riders strong, down 2 before the flag even dropped. The breakaway of the day was caught with 14 kilometers to go, as the road stopped being completely flat. Because there were teeth on this route, just smaller ones. There is a climb of about 1.5 kilometers at 6% gradient inside the final 10k. There's a short kicker with 3k remaining. And the finishing straight rises, gently, all the way to the line. And it was the reason Mads Pedersen was the favorite rather than the purer sprinter. Quick-Step moved Evenepoel forward. Ineos Grenadiers came up. Jumbo-Visma came up with them. And then, with the race just a few minutes from a completely ordinary conclusion, Roglic did something nobody expected. He went at 2.6k to go, on a road that was tilted upward, into a headwind-free finale against a field of sprinters and their lead-out trains. On paper, it was an absurd place for a GC rider to attack. In practice, it was one of the smartest moves of the whole race. The bunch was strung out and hurting from the kicker. Everyone was watching the sprint trains. Nobody was watching the guy in second overall. 4 riders got across: Pascal Ackermann, Danny Van Poppel, Fred Wright, and Pedersen, who had to burn an enormous amount of energy to make the junction and said so afterwards. And behind, at almost precisely the same moment, Remco Evenepoel's rear wheel went soft. His team had done recon on the finale the previous day, and decided the roads were dangerous. I was scared, to be honest, in the last 4 or 5 kilometers, he said. He drifted back through the bunch because of it. He tried to move up again on the steep bump and felt the rear end go away from him. Here is where the rulebook becomes important. Evenepoel punctured inside the final 3 kilometers. A rider who suffers a recognized mechanical or crash inside that distance can be awarded the time of the group he was in. Ultimately, it's up to the race jury. Evenepoel was inside that line, barely, and was, wrongfully or rightfully, awarded the same time as that group. Out front, Roglic rode the front of the 5-man group all the way through the finale, which is not what you do if you're racing tactically for the stage win. He dragged them into the finishing straight with 8 seconds on the bunch, and he kept pulling. He was doing it for the GC, and it was working. And then, everything would change. Here's what the footage shows. Coming into the last 150 meters, Roglic is on the front, and he is finished. He has done the work. The sprint is starting behind him, and he has nothing left to contribute to it. He is over on the left of the road, close to the white line. He swings right. He is looking for shelter, for a wheel to sit on. Anywhere that is not on the front of a bike race, he can no longer win. He does not look over his shoulder first. Fred Wright is already there. Wright is coming through on Roglic's right, into the gap between Roglic and the barriers, doing what a sprinter does at that point in the finish. Angle from the side of the road appears to show Wright's arm making contact with Roglic's bars. Roglic goes down at the speed with about 75 meters to go, in the middle of the road in front of the cameras. He's up almost immediately, in the way concussed and athletes full of adrenaline always are, and he remounts and crosses the line with his kit shredded and his right side raw. Pedersen, meanwhile, has won the sprint by a comfortable margin, but ended up spending most of his press conference talking about somebody else's accident. Wright, asked about it the following morning, gave the answer that every rider in the situation would give. Quote, "I felt there was a bit of contact, but it was just an unfortunate racing incident, and I am so gutted for Roglic." He said he had messaged him privately that evening. He said he had been looking forward to watching Roglic fight for the red jersey. That's where the story should have ended. Roglic did not go to the bus. He sat down on the road past the finish line and stayed there for a minute. He was still there when Evenepoel came home 3 minutes later, having ridden the last kilometers on a flat tire with his race hanging on a rulebook. The Belgian, before he went to the podium to collect the red jersey he was about to keep for good, walked over to check on the man trying to take it off of him. On Wednesday morning, Jumbo-Visma announced that Roglic would not take the start of stage 17. He said the pain was the reason. He said the GC fight was over and the team would go looking for stage wins. Evenepoel's lead over the field went from 86 seconds to 2 minutes and 1 second. Enric Mas inherited second. A 19-year-old, Juan Ayuso, moved onto the podium. The Vuelta, as a contest, was finished. Roglic had abandoned 2 Grand Tours in 1 season. 3 days later, on the Friday, an article appeared on the Jumbo-Visma team website. It was published while stage 19 was in progress. Fred Wright was on his bike, racing, and couldn't respond. In it, Roglic spoke about the crash for the first time in detail, and he did not describe it as a racing incident. Quote, "This was not okay. This shouldn't happen. People move on swiftly as if nothing happened. For me, that doesn't apply. This is not the way I want the sport to continue, and I want to make that clear. The crash was not caused by a bad road or a lack of safety, but by a rider's behavior. I don't have eyes on my back. Otherwise, I would have run wide. Wright came from behind and rolled the handlebars out of my hands before I knew it." The statement did not stop with Roglic. Richard Plug, the Jumbo-Visma manager, used the occasion to talk about a database of racing incidents and the categorization of their causes. He said research shows rider behavior is responsible in about half of crashes. He said that riders should brake and use their brains. He said there was a lack of respect from younger riders, and that 10 years ago, the older riders were saying the same thing about the generation that is now old, and that nothing has changed. Fred Wright's team, Bahrain Victorious, answered the same evening, and they weren't gentle about it. The team said crashes are unfortunately part of the sport and always will be. Then they staked their claim. Quote, "The race footage supports this. Our rider does not deviate from his racing line before the incident." They also said, in a sharper way, that if a team has feelings about an incident on the road, the place to raise them is with the commissaires after the stage, not in a blog post several days later. The commissaires, it's very worth noting, took no action on stage 16. They reviewed the finish, and they did not sanction Wright. Wright's own reply was a little quieter and gentler. Quote, "I don't think this statement is fair, to be honest. As the footage shows, it was a simple racing incident. But I also appreciate that he was challenging for the red jersey here at La Vuelta. And of course, I did send him a private message after the stage to see if he was okay." Then Matej Mohoric spoke. Mohoric is Slovenian. He is Roglic's compatriot, and at that point, one of the most respected riders in the peloton. He is also Fred Wright's teammate. Standing before the Grand Prix of Montreal, he was asked about the incident. Quote, "I saw 3 or 4 different videos. There is nothing to say. It is very, very clear that Primoz deviated from his line. He didn't check over his shoulder if anyone was there, and he was clearly on the white line. We have respect in the peloton, but some riders are more eager to push for position than others. I think if you ask the peloton, everyone will tell you that Primoz is more eager to push for position than Fred. We know that Primoz crashes a lot, and this is not the first time this happened." Roglic, for his part, gave nothing back. Speaking to a radio station later that autumn, reviewing his season, he was asked about reacting more emotionally than he ever had before. Quote, "I was asking myself if it was necessary to say or write anything. But then, in the end, why always be silent? I just wanted to express that I want to race in an atmosphere of fair play. I think I had to let it out. Here's where I stand, and you're free to disagree." Roglic moved. That's what the footage shows from every available angle. He was on the white line at the left of the road, finished looking for shelter. He crossed to the right without checking. Wright was already occupying that space, sprinting, holding his line. Contact was inevitable the moment Roglic started moving, and Wright had no time and nowhere to go. At the end of the day, that is just a racing incident, and racing incidents are almost always somebody's mistake. This one was his. What's harder to defend is everything that came after. A World Tour team publishing an accusation against a rider days after the event was unprecedented. Roglic lost a Vuelta he might not have even won anyway. Evenepoel, in all likelihood, was going to win that race regardless. But what the crash actually cost us was the ending. We never got to see the true battles in the last week. Instead, we got a press release and a man's season come to another brutal end. If you enjoyed this one, there's a lot more where it came from. Here at 124 Cycling, we cover the races, the riders, and the arguments that stay with the sport long after the results are filed. And every video takes a good amount of time to put together, so subscribing generally helps. Hit subscribe and ring the bell if you want to know when the next video lands. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.